On BBC Local Radio in Shropshire, South Cheshire, North Staffordshire, the West Midlands, Worcestershire and Herefordshire. You're listening to The Gruesome Twosome. Mike Adams and Chris Savory on the show that values your vinyls. It's The Record Collectors between now and 9 tonight.
Welcome to the programme, Brian.
Lovely to be here. Thanks very much.
Well, we're talking to you in the heart of Manchester at the moment, a long way from Pebble Mill and Coventry and Shrewsbury and Stoke and everywhere else. You're on tour with the Drifters currently.
Yes, this week we're at the Palace Theatre in Manchester, and we'll be doing the show until Saturday with Susie Quattro, Joe Brown, the Drifters, and us, of course. And looking forward to it greatly. This is going to be the first day.
Can we talk about your career and just put our facts down right? Because you went to Decca initially, and at the same time I think you were auditioning about the time the Beatles were auditioning. Can you put the facts right, exactly what happened, where and when, in your own words?
I'll give you the true story. The thing was, a lot of people said that in those days that the Beatles were turned down by Decca in preference to us. Well, the thing was, we were from London, the Beatles were from Liverpool. We'd been working at the dance halls all over England while the Beatles had been in Germany, and I think Decca just thought, well, this is a local kind of band. Also, we were one of the only bands in the country that were actually doing proper vocal harmony. Which we carried on doing for years and years. We've been doing it for like on and off with the tremolos for like 30 odd years now, which is quite a long time. And but in those days they wanted to use us for three things. They wanted to make our own records of the songs that we were going out and doing in the dance halls, and they also wanted us to back vocally people that they were bringing in from America, like Johnny Burnett, the late great Johnny Burnett, and Gary U.S. Bonds. They had Tommy Steele, even the Vernon's Girls. Their record of The Locomotion, if you listen carefully, is us singing. All those kind of things. We did all those things in the early days. So they made, if you like, a lot of money out of us in those days by getting us doing other things besides just recording our own records. We were quite versatile, as well as being a vocal backing group. We were also an instrumental and a vocal band.
Did you know Joe Meek?
I knew Joe Meek for a few years. I wasn't into the scene that he was doing. Ours was totally different kind of music to what Joe Meek was doing. It was what Joe was doing was an innovation at that time, a total innovation. There was nothing like it, and there has never been anything like it since. It was getting close to the stuff that they're doing these days. In fact, in the 80s and 90s, it was getting close to that in those days.
There's a book out now by John Repsch about the legendary Joe Meek, and John's been on the programme recently, and Joe is a bit of an enigma, and people seem reluctant to talk about him. We know that he had sort of certain sort of sexual preferences and this sort of thing. But as a man and the music, and so, what kind of a guy was he to work with and to talk to?
Well, I was talking. We did a show a few weeks ago with Screaming Lord Sutch. Okay, now, Sutchy is the best because he knows all about Joe Meek, and he was telling me some of the stories about the gun and all that, and the blowing up people and all that stuff. But I never did really meet Joe Meek personally. I can only sort of go through sort of stories that other people have told me about him. I mean, for instance, there's Clem Catini now, who's the original drummer from the Tornadoes. Back on the road with the Tornadoes as well. Another man that knows all about Joe Meek. It seems to me, though, that the business side of it didn't work too well for the actual musicians. I'm not knocking anything because I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I've got to say that a lot of the musicians that were around and the singers and people that were doing it didn't seem to make much money out of that, all that good stuff that was coming out, like people like Mike Berry as well, doing stuff for Joe Meek. The business side I don't think was too good. The actual what I call the innovation, the newness of it at that time was great, and so Joe Meek's name will live forever because of those things that he did.
Now, you work with, of course, some would say the king of rockabilly, and many rock and rollers consider the king of rock and roll, and that, of course, was Johnny Burnett, the late, great Johnny Burnett. But you worked with Johnny Burnett. I mean, I've only read about Burnett, the kind of character he was, and so on. Well, I mean, what was he like?
Well, it turned out the first thing that we did, that there were two artists that came over from America. One was Johnny Burnett, and one was Bob Luman, the country singer. Sort of country rock singer, I would call him. Great big guy, massive, great big tall guy. Was Bob Luman. But Johnny Burnett, we turned out, we had a young manager at that time called Harry Dawson, who's died now, and he was sort of half managing us. And he said, there's a show coming on, and it starts at one of the theatres in London, I can't remember which one, and we'd like you to do your own spot on the show, and also to back Johnny Burnett. So of course we jumped at it. We said, this is great, that's just what we want to do. And also on that show was Gary U.S. Bonds. Now, we didn't realise, but Decca were going to use some of the, or at least some of the producers that were at Decca then, were either doing outside stuff as well. So we went into the studios and we did the work with Johnny Burnett, and all the English work that he did, anything that he did here, we were on. We're the doo-wops in the back there, and also for Gary U.S. Bonds. On the show, now this live show came up and we said, oh great, we'd love to do it. So we thought, oh, this is great, you know, we got all the movements off and everything that we were going to do with the backing vocals, and you know, they put us behind the stage, behind the curtain, and we were all standing there with one microphone behind this curtain while the guys were out there doing their bit on stage. We didn't get even seen on that show, and we didn't do our own spot. All we did was the backings, you know, so we were a bit upset with it at first, but then it got quite funny because we were, you know, taking our trousers off and things like that, you know, it was lovely.
I mean, did you get a chance to, well, presumably you must have run through the numbers with Johnny Burnett. Well, I mean, his music went a little more middle of the road about that time. But what kind of guy was he to go out with a pint for, or to have a chat with, or what was his interest? I mean,
yeah, very much in those days. He was ever so pleased to be around with people, with English bands and people, because it was his first time here. Well, it seemed like, I don't know if it was his first time here actually, but it seemed like his first time here. He didn't know much about anything, and very quiet, unassuming and nice guy, which the kind of music that he was into would suggest that anyway. And to me, he epitomised his music as a man.
Now you knew Brian, you knew also Billy Fury quite well, didn't you? And I get a feeling that Johnny Burnett was a major influence on Billy Fury.
Yes, and a major influence on a lot of bands. He was an influence on us when we first started, because if you listen to our music when we first started, the Tremolos and me, we were doing everything was very fast. So was rockabilly. So was that kind of stuff they were doing. Very fast and very sort of loose, if you like, and raw. And that's the kind of music that when we were first around, that's the kind of music we were listening to. The imports from America and Radio Luxembourg and those sort of things. Nobody listened to any of the other stations in those days. It was always Radio Luxembourg that you listened to. A lot of the people that were influences on us, we actually met, including Buddy Holly and the Crickets. When they toured here, we at our local, I think it was the Odeon or the ABC or something, their tour came there, and we actually met Norman Petty, and he took us backstage to meet the guys and gave us a tape of, because we used to follow a lot of Cricket stuff. If you look at some of the early photographs of Brian Poole and the Tremolos, you'd see that I wore glasses.
Yes.
And that was a direct influence. I wore them anyway, but I got big ones so that I looked like Buddy Holly. We did every one of those songs that they did, and on that night Norman Petty gave us a tape of about 6 songs, because we'd sent over to America before that, and he'd sent us back tapes, stuff that hadn't been recorded even. And one of those songs was Someone Someone, which we didn't get to record until around about 1965, I believe, but we played it on stage for all that time in between. When we recorded it, straight away it went to the top of the charts in every country of the world.
Those tapes, was it a different tape from the release version of Someone Someone? Do you have a tape that nobody else has got? I mean, because collectors are always after the alternate takes of everything, of course.
I've got a few of those tapes. I mean, for instance, not only the Crickets ones, but Norman Petty came over to England when we were going to record Someone Someone, when we'd signed with Decca. He came over to England and actually played on Someone Someone. So if you listen to Someone Someone by Brian Poole and the Tremolos, Norman Petty, manager of the Crickets, is playing on that track. And he plays guitar and piano on that track. And also we did on the same session a song called 3 Bells, which we had a hit with, I think, a year or two later. He played on that one as well. So quite an influence. And of course we sat in the studio looking at him and thinking, oh, what a musician, you know, he's great, this guy. And he was the first man to sort of give us any real influence, if you like. We did, from then on, we didn't do any songs on stage that weren't either a Buddy Holly song or a Cricket song or a Norman Petty song of some kind. So we had a repertoire of, say, we were doing American camps, singing for 4 hours. That's why my voice is like it is today. But we had 4 hours worth of songs. So you can imagine, at home I've got tapes of all kinds of stuff. Now also I've got one that I'm very, very proud of, that we had a small tape recorder. It's a reel-to-reel recorder in those days, and one of the only battery ones that you could get.
Grundig,
in fact, yeah, Grundig, the green and
yeah,
a small one anyway.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they were expensive though, weren't they?
Yeah, and we were touring with Roy Orbison, and he was on. We had a '1 with "Do You Love Me" at the time. We were touring with Roy, and he said, "I hear you're looking for a song for your next single." So we said, "Yeah." We were all on the coach going somewhere between the gigs, and he said, "Look, have a listen to this." Got his guitar down and played and sung Candyman, and we listened to Candyman the way he sung and played it, just Roy and the guitar, and we took it in the studio, learnt it, and we brought out Candyman. What was that? About that same year, and that was another million-selling hit. You know, so all ours came from the actual people.
Let's have, I think we'll play Do You Love Me, of course, and first, and to get the feel of it, Brian Poole and the Tremolos.
You broke my heart.
Oh, welcome back. We're talking to Brian Poole of the Tremolos fame and his memories of rock stars throughout the late 50s and throughout the 60s. And we've got to go back a little bit, because you've got these tapes of presumably Buddy Holly singing, and they also the masters, as it were. Have you ever thought of getting them legalised and put out? I mean, because the Holly fans...
No, I wouldn't do it. There's 2 reasons. They were personal things, and even those very old ones, try and find them in my house at the moment, you wouldn't find them amongst thousands and thousands of tapes anyway. The one that I have got is the Roy Orbison one. Those early tapes any of us might have, because I haven't had them for years and years, and I haven't had them out for years and years. But the reason for that is they were personal things, and if anybody got hold of it, it's like somebody gives you a guitar. Just giving an example, I was at a #1s party of everyone that's had #1s in London, and Des O'Connor was there, and Paul McCartney was there, and I remember, whether it was a joke or not, I remember Paul McCartney offering Des O'Connor something like £500,000 or something for the guitar that Buddy Holly gave him when he was the compere for their tour, and he just said no way, I've got it, and I keep it, and that's where it stays.
Well, in actual fact, it went up for auction last month. The Desert Conner guitar in London. They had an auction for the guitar.
So Des needs a few quid.
Well, that's another story. I think this here Candyman for all time's sake. And that was Candyman. We're talking to Brian Poole here and his memories. Can we perhaps talk about, well, I think your memories of the 60s and the development of the Tremolos? Of course, you were together, to the public anyway, together to most of the 60s, and then the Tremolos went their own way. Can you tell us about how that came about, Brian?
Yeah, it's quite an easy story. We started off as a band. We were called the Tremolos. When we signed to Decca, they decided after the first run of our third record, they decided to call us Brian Poole and the Tremolos. It was decided that I would be the front singer, although I wasn't singing lead at that time anyway. They just came to me one day, the rest of the guys, and said, we've had a meeting and we've decided there's got to be a front singer in this band. So I said, oh yeah, well I agree with that entirely, because I didn't think they'd say it was me. And they said, look, we all want it to be you, so will you do it? So I said, yeah, fine. So it was called Brian Poole and the Tremolos for a while. So we went through the 60s recording and all the tours. We toured the world three times because our records came out in loads of different countries. Like for instance, when we had Do You Love Me #1 here, it was #1 in, I think it was about 12 different countries apart from here at the same time. So it's a lot different to how they do it now. It was #1 at roughly the same time. So we went through all that time, and then they decided Decca were going to sign us, our management rather, were going to sign us to CBS. So when we signed with CBS decided they were going to do exactly the same thing that Decca did in the early days, take us back and get us doing songs together, which we did, which they called the Tremolos, or they called Brian Poole. We were all on them anyway. Songs absolutely separately. Some the Tremolos sung on their own. Some I sung on my own with an orchestra and things like that. So they had 3 different ways of getting hits, which I suppose was quite a clever move in those days, but it didn't do us any good. We were still touring together, and we were still working together, so it didn't really work. It didn't gel. What happened was the Tremolos had Here Comes My Baby, which was one of the songs that had been recorded on sessions that we'd done about a year, 6 months maybe beforehand. They had that one, and CBS decided that was going to be the one that they went really full pelt on. So they had a hit with Here Comes My Baby, which was a brilliant song. Still love it, and I sing it anyway now as well. So it's one of those songs that everybody likes, and you do remember ever so well. So they had the hit with that. That meant that really we couldn't call the band Brian Poole and the Tremolos anymore, because CBS had brought that one out as the Tremolos. So that started the Tremolos on their own. I had to then drop out and go my own way, because we couldn't stay together, obviously. I couldn't front a #1 band, in fact, without being part of that record, which I didn't happen to be. So we went our separate ways for years and years and years. I mean, we see more of each other now than we ever did then. It's ridiculous,
Is it Alan Blakely that's still with him? Is Alan?
Yeah, well,
with his bushy hair.
That's right, Alan. Well, Alan and myself started the band when we were at school. We decided we were going to be rock stars, and in those days we were flash little Herberts. We really were, and we told everybody we were already rock stars, and we were doing all kinds of shows and everything. We hadn't done anything at all. We'd made our own guitars, and they sounded horrible, and we were just getting a band together at that time, but good fun. And we saw, of course, a lot of each other. We were best mates then. Now, right now, Alan's got 2 daughters exactly the same age as my 2 daughters, and they talk to each other. So obviously they say, where's your dad this week and where's your dad this week? So we end up phoning each other and talking through old times. I think there's a book in this, actually.
I think there is a book as well. Can I say on behalf of the record collectors and our listeners, Brian, thanks very much for guesting on the programme. We must go out with one of your records. If I can find someone, I think that would be appropriate. Is there any tours planned for the autumn of this year at all? Anything around the UK? I know you're in the middle of a tour now, as we're in Manchester, but is there anything planned a little bit later in the year?
We're booked now solidly until more or less into January next year. But it's all mainly on one-nighters, so everyone's got to look out for us and see where we are and come and see us.
Have you anything out on vinyl, on tape, or compact disc at the moment that our listener can buy?
There's an album that's out at the moment, and it's a Decca album that's got all the old hits on, and I think there's a compact disc coming out soon with all our hits from Decca, an actual compact disc, because we signed a new contract for it a little while ago, all of us, and looks like that will be out soon. So you'll be able to hear all the drum pedal squeaks and all the real horror notes that we dropped and everything, because on compact disc they'll all come out.